Welcome to Dark Hours of Day. I'm glad you're here because tonight we're diving into something special, a collection of stories I call Never Work the Late Shift. These are tales from the shadows of the night shift: lonely diners, deserted gas stations, warehouses that echo with more than just footsteps. 7 accounts of ordinary people who clocked in and found something waiting for them, something that wasn't on the schedule. If you like what you hear, help us keep these stories coming. Hit that subscribe button and tap the like button below. It means more than you know. Now, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and sit back as we step into the dark hours of day. Let's begin. I have no idea how there could be people that can't be recorded, but there are. Cameras, phones, even mirrors were just blank. And then they saw me looking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back and start over. This happened about 6 months ago. I'd been working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner just off the highway. Rusty's, it's called. It's one of those places that's been around forever, all chipped countertops and flickering neon signs. I'd taken the job because it paid decent, and honestly, I liked the quiet. Most nights, it was just me, the hum of the fridge, and maybe a trucker or two grabbing coffee before heading back out. I'd been there long enough to know the regulars, the ones who'd nod and leave a couple bucks on the table. But that night, it wasn't like that. It was a Tuesday, sometime after 2 a.m. The roads were dead, hadn't seen a car pass in over an hour. I was wiping down the counter, mostly to stay awake, when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, and there he was. Hood up, hands stuffed in his pockets, just standing there in the doorway. I couldn't see his face, not with the shadow from that ratty gray hoodie swallowing it whole. He didn't move at first, just stood there, like he was sizing the place up. I forced a smile and said, "Hey, take a seat, anywhere you like." Standard line. He didn't answer. He just shuffled over to the corner booth, the one by the window farthest from the counter, and sat down. I figured he'd pick up the menu, maybe mumble an order, but he didn't. He just sat there, head tilted down, staring at the table. I glanced at him a couple times while I refilled the coffee pot, trying not to seem nosy. Something about him felt off. You know that feeling? Like your gut's telling you to keep your distance, but you don't know why? That's what I had. I shook it off, though. I'd dealt with weirdos before. Drunks, drifters, people who just needed somewhere warm to sit. I told myself he was harmless. About 10 minutes passed, and he still hadn't said a word. I walked over, notepad in hand, and asked if he wanted anything. Up close, I could see his hands, pale, knuckles cracked, nails bitten down to nothing. He didn't look up, just shook his head once, sharp and quick. His voice came out low, raspy, like he'd smoked a pack a day for years. "Not yet," he said. That was it. I nodded and backed off, figuring he'd call me over when he was ready. But he never did. He just sat there, hour after hour, not moving, not ordering, just existing. By 4 a.m., I was getting antsy. The diner was empty except for him, and the silence was starting to feel heavy. I kept catching him in the corner of my eye, and every time he was in the exact same position, head down, hands on the table, hoodie up. I started wondering if he was asleep, but then I'd see his fingers twitch, just slightly, like he was awake and waiting for something. I didn't know what. I didn't want to know. That's when I remembered the security camera. It's this little thing above the register, pointed at the dining area. The boss had it installed years ago after some kid smashed a window, and it records to a monitor in the back. I don't check it often. Nothing ever happens worth watching. But that night, I needed to see something normal. I slipped into the back room and pulled up the live feed, expecting to see him sitting there, same as always. The booth was empty. I blinked, leaned closer to the screen. The camera showed the whole diner, counter, stools, the other booths. But where he was supposed to be? Nothing. Just the table, the cracked vinyl seat, the window reflecting the neon sign outside. I looked out through the serving hatch, and there he was, still sitting there, plain as day. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe the feed was glitching, but when I checked again, it was the same. Empty booth. I felt my stomach twist. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and aimed it at him through the hatch, keeping low so he wouldn't see me. The screen showed the booth, empty again. No hoodie, no twitching hands, nothing. But when I looked with my own eyes, He was right there. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, my phone shaking in my hand. Then I remembered the mirror, the big one behind the counter, angled so I could see most of the diner while I worked. I turned slowly, dreading what I'd find. His reflection wasn't there either. The mirror showed the booth, the window, the faint glow of the parking lot lights, but not him. That's when he looked up. I didn't see it happen. I just felt it. That prickling on the back of your neck when someone's watching you. I turned from the mirror, and his head was tilted up, hood still hiding most of his face. But I could see his eyes now, pale, almost white, locked on me through the hatch. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stared, like he knew I'd been checking on him, like he'd been waiting for me to figure it out. I ducked back into the room, heart pounding so loud I could hear it over the hum of the fridge. I didn't know what he was, or wasn't, but I wasn't going out there. I stayed in the back, gripping a butter knife like it was some kind of weapon, listening for any sound. Footsteps, a chair scraping, anything. But it was dead quiet. Too quiet. Around 5 a.m., I heard the bell jingle again. I peeked out, praying it was a customer, someone normal. The booth was empty. No sign of him, no hoodie, no pale hands, nothing. I checked the camera footage later, rewound it to when he walked in. The door opened on its own. The booth stayed empty the whole time. But I know what I saw. I know he was there. I quit a week later. Couldn't stand being alone in that place anymore. The boss asked why, and I just said I wasn't cut out for nights. I didn't tell him about the guy, or whatever he was. I don't think he'd believe me. I barely believe it myself. But sometimes when I'm driving past that diner late at night, I swear I see something in that corner booth. And I keep driving. This was last summer. I'd been working nights at a gas station just outside town, one of those rundown spots with 2 pumps and a flickering sign that barely said open. It was a nowhere job, something to pay the bills while I figured things out. Most shifts were boring, stocking shelves, mopping floors, watching headlights streak by on the highway. I didn't mind the quiet, though. It was just me and the crickets, usually. But that night, things got weird. It was a Friday, around 1 a.m. The air was thick, humid, the kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back. No cars had pulled in for hours, and I was leaning on the counter, scrolling my phone when I heard it. A faint tapping. At first, I thought it was the AC unit acting up again. It's this old rattling thing in the corner. But then it got louder, sharper, like someone was knocking on glass. I looked up, expecting to see a late-night straggler at the door, but the lot was empty. Just my beat-up Toyota parked under the floodlight, sitting there like always. The tapping stopped, and I figured it was nothing, maybe a branch hitting the window in the wind. But then it started again, this time from the back of the store, near the bathroom. It's one of those single-stall setups, door locked with a key you have to ask for. No one had asked for it that night. No one had even come in. I grabbed the broom, more for something to hold than anything else, and walked over to check. The door was shut tight, the out-of-order sign still taped up from last week when the sink clogged. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath. Nothing, just the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I knocked once hard and said, "Anyone in there?" No answer. I turned to walk away, and that's when I heard it, a whisper. Low, scratchy, like someone was right on the other side of the door, lips pressed to the wood. I couldn't make out words at first, just this soft, hissing sound. My stomach dropped. I backed up a step, broom still in hand, and said louder, "Hey, you need to come out now." The whispering stopped. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. Late nights mess with your head sometimes, but then it started again, clearer this time. "Jess," it said, dragging out the S like a snake. "My name's Jess." No one else was in the store. I hadn't told anyone my name that night. No customers, no calls, nothing. I froze, staring at the door, waiting for it to move, but it didn't. The voice kept going, "Jess, you're alone," over and over, like it was stuck on repeat. I bolted back to the counter, grabbed my phone, and dialed my manager. Straight to voicemail. Figures. He never picks up after midnight. I didn't know what else to do, so I checked the security cam on the monitor under the register. It's got a view of the pumps, the door, and part of the hallway leading to the bathroom. The lot was still empty, the store was clear, and the bathroom door, It was closed, just like I'd left it. No one had gone in or out. I rewound the footage an hour, 2 hours. Nothing. Just me, pacing around, alone. But the whispering didn't stop. It got louder, sharper, cutting through the hum of the AC. I could hear it from the counter now, even with the radio on, even with my hands over my ears. Jess opened the door. I wasn't about to do that. I grabbed the key ring, thinking maybe I could lock it tighter or something stupid like that. But when I got close, the handle jiggled. Just once, quick, like someone tested it from the inside. I ran outside, phone in one hand, keys in the other, and stood under the floodlight by my car. The whispering stopped the second I crossed the threshold, like it couldn't follow me out. I scanned the windows, the pumps, the dark stretch of highway. Nothing. No cars, no people, just the crickets and that sticky heat. I stayed out there for 20 minutes, debating whether to call the cops or just ditch the shift entirely. In the end, I went back in. Rent doesn't pay itself. The rest of the night was quiet. Too quiet. I kept the bathroom door in sight, didn't turn my back on it once. When my relief showed up at 6 a.m., I didn't say a word, just grabbed my stuff and left. I checked the bathroom before I clocked out, though. Door was still locked, still out of order. I didn't open it, didn't want to. A few days later, I asked the morning guy if he'd ever heard anything weird back there. He laughed, said the place was creepy, but nothing like that. Then he paused, looked at me funny, and said, "You didn't unlock that door, did you? Last year, some kid swore he heard scratching from inside, but the plumber said it was empty, just pipes." I didn't tell him about the whispers. I didn't tell him it knew my name. I don't work there anymore. Quit after that shift, actually. But sometimes, when I drive by that gas station late at night, I see the lights flicker, and I wonder if it's still whispering, waiting for someone else to listen. My name's Tyler. I've been doing delivery for one of those food apps for about a year now. Late shifts mostly, because the tips are better and I don't mind the dark. You see a lot of weird stuff on the road at night, but it's usually just drunk people stumbling around or raccoons darting into the bushes. Nothing I couldn't handle. At least, that's what I thought until last month. What happened that night? It wasn't normal. It wasn't anything I can explain. It was a Thursday, just past midnight. I'd picked up an order from a burger joint downtown. 2 combos, extra fries, nothing fancy. The drop-off was a house about 15 minutes away, out in the suburbs where the streets get quiet and the yards get big. The app said, "Leave at door," which is fine by me. Less small talk, more time to keep moving. I didn't think much of it when I pulled up. The place looked standard. 2-story, brick, porch light on. One of those fake security cameras stuck above the door, the kind people buy to scare off kids. I parked in the driveway, grabbed the bag, and headed up the steps. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not food or anything you'd expect, just this sharp, damp stink, like wet dirt or mold. It hit me as I got closer to the door, strong enough that I wrinkled my nose. I figured maybe they had a busted pipe or something. Old houses get like that. I set the bag down on the mat, snapped a quick photo for the app, and turned to leave. That's when I heard the voice. "Tyler, wait." It came from inside the house, muffled but clear, low, almost lazy, like someone talking through a yawn. I stopped cold, halfway down the steps. No one was supposed to be there, not for a leave-at-door order. I checked my phone. No notes, no updates, just the address and the name. Alex. I looked back at the door, still closed, the bag sitting there under the yellow porch light. You good?" I called out, loud enough to carry. No answer. Just that smell, heavier now, creeping into my throat. I should have left. Every part of me was screaming to get back in my car and peel out, but I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I thought they'd complain to the app, dock my rating, or something dumb like that. So I knocked. 3 quick raps, firm, like I meant it. The voice came again, closer this time, right behind the door. "Come in, Tyler. It's open." I stared at the knob, my hand hovering over it, and I swear I saw it twitch. Just a little, like someone had brushed it from the other side. I didn't open it. I'm not that stupid. Instead, I stepped back and said, "Hey, your food's here. I'm heading out." My voice cracked a little. I could hear it, but I didn't care. I was already backing down the steps when the door creaked open. Not wide, just a couple inches, enough to see the dark inside. No lights, no movement, just this black gap and that smell pouring out, thick and sour. The bag was still on the mat, untouched. Then I saw the hand. It slid out from the crack, long, thin, grayish, with fingers that looked too bendy, like they didn't have enough bones. It grabbed the bag, slow and deliberate, and pulled it inside. The door didn't close, though. It stayed open, that gap staring at me like an eye. I heard the voice again, softer now, almost a whisper. "You should have come in." I ran, didn't look back, didn't check if anything followed, just sprinted to my car, fumbled the keys, and floored it out of there. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. I kept checking the rear view the whole way home, expecting headlights or something worse, but the road stayed empty. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door, turned on every light, and sat there, phone in my lap, until the sun came up. The next day, I checked the app. The order was marked delivered, 5 stars, no comments. I thought about calling the restaurant, asking if they knew the guy. But what was I going to say? Your customers got freaky hands in a haunted house? I even drove by the address a couple days later, in daylight with people around. The house looked normal. Curtains up, grass cut, no weird smell. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Then last week, I got another order. Same address, same name, Alex. I canceled it right away, didn't even pick up the food. I don't care if they ban me from the app. I'm not going back there. Whatever's in that house, it's not getting another chance at me. I've been a security guard for 3 years now, mostly at places no one cares about. Empty warehouses, half-built condos, that kind of thing. The gig's easy. Walk the perimeter, check the locks, make sure nobody's where they shouldn't be. I don't scare easy. Seen too many shadows that turned out to be trash bags or stray cats. But last fall, I took a job that got under my skin. It wasn't anything obvious. No ghosts, no monsters. Just a night that didn't add up, and I can't shake it. The place was a storage facility. One of those big lots with rows of metal units out past the edge of the city. Chain link fence, gravel paths, a couple floodlights that buzzed like they were on their last legs. I started at 10 p.m., standard shift, relieving a guy who barely looked at me, just handed over the keys and said, "Keep an eye on Unit 17. Didn't explain why, didn't stick around. I figured it was a hazing thing. New guy gets the cryptic warning, "Ha ha!" Whatever. I didn't ask. The first few hours were fine. Quiet, cold, the usual. I'd do my rounds every hour, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other, crunching through the gravel. The units were all locked up tight, padlocks glinting under the beam. Unit 17 was in the back corner, same as the rest, rusted orange door, no windows, nothing special. I checked it on my first pass, tugged the lock. Solid, no big deal. Around 1 a.m., I noticed the smell. Sharp, chemical, like bleach or paint thinner. Faint at first, but stronger the closer I got to the back row. I thought maybe someone had spilled something, left a can open inside one of the units. Happens sometimes. People store weird stuff. I swept my light over Unit 17 again, and that's when I saw it. The lock was off. Not broken, not cut, just gone. The latch hung loose, door shut but not secured. I'd checked it 2 hours ago, and it was locked then. I know it was. I stood there, listening. No wind that night, no cars on the road, just the hum of those floodlights and my own breathing. I called it in on the radio, standard procedure. Unit 17's unlocked, might be a break-in. Static came back, then the supervisor's voice, bored and crackly. "Check it out, log it, we'll deal with it tomorrow." Great. I clipped the radio back to my belt, pulled my flashlight higher, and pushed the door open. Inside was empty. Not just clean, bare. No boxes, no junk, nothing but concrete floor and metal walls. The bleach smell so strong my eyes watered. I stepped in, swung the light around. Nothing to steal, nothing to mess with. But the floor was wet, shiny under the beam, like someone had mopped it right before I got there. I backed out, shut the door, and rigged it closed with a spare zip tie from my pocket. Logged it as unsecured, empty, no damage. Figured that was that. On my next round, the zip tie was cut. Clean slice, edges sharp like with a razor. The door was shut again, lock still missing. I didn't open it this time. Just stood there, staring, feeling that itch you get when someone's watching you. I turned, swept the lot with my light. Empty rows, empty gravel, just me in the shadows. I radioed it in again, voice steady even though my hands weren't. Unit 17's open again, zip ties cut. More static then. Probably kids. Lock it up and move on, kids. At 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. Sure, I didn't have another zip tie, so I wedged a rock under the door to keep it from swinging. Kept walking, kept checking, but every pass I'd glance at 17. By 4 a.m., the rock was gone, rolled a few feet away like it'd been kicked. The door was cracked open now, just an inch, black inside. The smell was unbearable, seeping out like a warning. I didn't touch it, didn't report it. Just finished my rounds, eyes on my watch, counting down to 6 a.m. When my shift ended, I handed the keys to the day guy, same one who'd warned me. He asked how it went, smirking like he knew something. I said, Unit 17's a problem. Door won't stay shut. He nodded, didn't blink, just took the keys and said, Yeah, it does that. I grabbed my bag and left. Didn't ask what he meant. Didn't want to know. I didn't go back for my next shift. Called in sick, then quit over text. They didn't argue. Guess they're used to it. I drive a different route now. Avoid that part of town. Whatever's in Unit 17, it's not my problem anymore. I started cleaning offices at night because I liked being left alone. No coworkers, no chatter, just me and a mop. The building was one of those glass and steel towers downtown, half empty since the pandemic. Third shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., wiping desks and vacuuming carpets for people who'd never see me. It was routine, boring, until about 2 months ago. Something happened on the 14th floor that I can't unsee, and I haven't been back since. It was a Wednesday, quiet as usual. I'd finished the lower levels and took the service elevator up to 14, mostly cubicles, a few locked offices, nothing special. The lights were motion sensor, so they'd flick on as I moved, then off behind me. I was pushing my cart, headphones in, when I noticed the air felt wrong, stale, heavy, like the vents had stopped running. I pulled one earbud out and listened. Nothing but the hum of the building, that low drone you stop noticing after a while. I started in the break room, emptying the trash, when I heard a chair scrape. Not loud, just a quick drag like someone shifted their weight. I poked my head out, empty cubicles, lights off past the first row. I figured it was the HVAC settling. Old buildings do that. But then it happened again, closer, from the hallway by the executive suites. I grabbed my flashlight, not the little one on the cart, the big one I kept in my bag, and headed over. The suites were locked, always were, but one door was ajar. Room 1423, VP's office. I'd cleaned it before, nothing fancy, just a desk and some framed awards. I nudged it open with my foot, light sweeping the room. Empty. Chair pushed in, blinds down, no sign anyone been there. I stepped inside to check the trash can, force of habit, and that's when I saw the window. It was cracked open, just a sliver, letting in a cold draft. 14th floor, no balcony, no way to open those windows. They're bolted shut. I'd checked them myself a dozen times. I leaned closer, shining my light outside. Nothing but the city below, streetlights blinking like stars. Then I heard it, a laugh, short, sharp, right behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking, but the room was still empty. The chair was out now, pulled back a foot, like someone had just stood up. I backed out, heart thumping, and slammed the door shut. Didn't lock it, didn't have the key, just ran to the elevator and hit the button. The doors didn't open. I pressed it again, harder, and heard that laugh echo down the hall, louder this time, bouncing off the glass. I took the stairs instead, all 14 flights, cart abandoned, flashlight still in my hand. When I hit the lobby, I told the front desk guy, some kid half asleep. He yawned, said he'd check the cameras later, but I was done. I clocked out, left my badge on the counter, and walked home in the dark. Next day, I got a text from my supervisor asking why I bailed. I didn't answer. He called a week later, said they found my card on 14, chair still out, window still cracked. No one on the footage, though. Just me, standing there staring at nothing. I told him to keep the last paycheck. I'm not going back to find out what was laughing. I've been working the late shift at a convenience store for 6 months now, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., stuck behind a counter that's more scratches than wood. It's a grimy little place, wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the kind of spot where the coffee's always burnt and the fluorescent lights flicker like they're about to give up. I took the job because it was close to my apartment, and I didn't mind the quiet. Most nights it's just me, the hum of the cooler, and the occasional guy grabbing a pack of smokes. I dealt with my share of weirdos, drunks, tweakers, people muttering to themselves, but nothing like what walked in last week. Whatever it wasn't human, and it's why I don't clock in anymore. It was a Monday, just past 3 a.m. Rain was hammering the roof, loud enough to drown out the radio I kept on low. The windows were streaked, turning the parking lot into a blurry mess of reflections. Headlights from the rare car passing by, the neon open sign buzzing red. I was mopping the floor near the chips aisle, trying to kill time, when the door chime went off. It's this shrill, broken sound, half dead from years of use. I looked up, expecting some soaked regular needing beer or a lighter, but what I saw stopped me cold. He was tall, too tall, head brushing the top of the doorframe, shoulders hunched like he wasn't used to fitting through. He wore a long coat, black and shiny, dripping something onto the tiles, not rainwater, thicker, darker, pooling in little oily splotches. His head was down, face hidden under a hood, and he didn't say a word, just shuffled past me, slow and uneven, toward the back of the store. I stood there, mop dripping in my hand, watching those puddles spread. They didn't smell like rain, more like tar, bitter and sharp, stinging my nose. I shook it off, told myself he was just some late-night oddball. Happens all the time. I called out, "Hey, let me know if you need anything," keeping my tone casual, and went back to the counter. I could see him in the convex mirror up top, the warped one that shows the whole store. He'd stopped in the snack aisle, facing the wall, coat still dripping, not moving. Just standing there like he forgot why he came in. I waited a minute, too, expecting him to grab something and shuffle up to pay. He didn't. By 3:30, I was getting twitchy. The rain hadn't let up, and the store felt smaller, like the walls were leaning in. I grabbed the baseball bat we keep under the register, wood, chipped but solid, and leaned over the counter. "You good back there?" I said, louder this time. Nothing, just that drip, 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 steady as a clock. I stepped out, bat resting on my shoulder, and started down the aisle. My sneakers squeaked on the wet floor, louder than I wanted, and I could feel my pulse picking up. I don't spook easy, but something about this guy, or whatever he was, felt wrong. I got halfway when he turned, slow, like his neck didn't want to move right, coat swinging heavy around him. His face, God, I can still see it, wasn't there. No eyes, no nose, just smooth, tight skin, pale and slick under the lights, glowing like wet wax. The hood framed it, shadows making it worse, and the coat hung open, empty inside. No shirt, no chest, just this hollow dark where a body should have been. I stopped, bat slipping an inch in my grip, throat dry. He didn't move toward me. Just stood there, head cocked like he was studying me. I managed to choke out, "You need to leave, now." My voice sounded thin, shaky, not like me. He didn't budge. Instead, he lifted an arm, long, too long, bending wrong at the elbow, and pointed at the counter, right where I'd been standing. The motion was jerky, like a puppet with loose strings, and that tar smell hit me full force, so thick I gagged. I swung the bat, not thinking, just reacting, cracked it hard against his side. It hit something solid, a dull thud, but he didn't flinch, didn't even sway. The coat rippled, and a chunk of that black stuff splattered onto the floor, sizzling faintly like it was alive. I stumbled back, knocking over a rack of candy bars, and he started moving, slow steps, dragging that puddle behind him, coming my way. I swung again, wild, missed, and hit the shelf instead, bags of chips exploding around me. He kept coming, closer, that faceless head tilting lower, like he was trying to see me better. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and loud over the rain. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and went out. Total dark, just me, the bat, and that drip, drip, drip right in front of me. I froze, waiting, every muscle locked up. Seconds stretched, 5, 10, I don't know, until the power snapped back on, buzzing overhead. He was gone. No coat, no puddles, just the candy and chips scattered across the aisle, the bat lying where I dropped it. I stood there, panting, staring at the empty spot. The door hadn't chimed, no one left. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and checked the camera feed from the register. Door opens at 3:04 a.m. Nothing walks in. Rack falls at 3:38. Lights cut out. That's it. No tall guy, no coat, just me swinging at air. I didn't clean up, didn't touch anything. I sat behind the counter, bat across my lap, watching the door until my relief showed up at 5. He's this old guy, Pete, been there forever. He saw the mess, raised an eyebrow, and I mumbled something about a shelf breaking. He didn't buy it, kept glancing at me while he swept, but didn't ask. I clocked out, left my key on the counter, and walked home as the rain finally stopped. Told my boss I was done over voicemail that afternoon, said I'd gotten sick, couldn't do nights anymore. He didn't call back. I haven't told anyone what I saw. Pete texted me yesterday, though, said they found black stains under the counter, stuff that wouldn't scrub off, stinking like tar. Asked if I spilled something. I didn't answer. I don't know what that thing was or why it pointed at my spot, but I'm not stepping foot in that store again. Not for $9 an hour, not for anything. I've been picking orders at a distribution warehouse for a year now, third shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., hauling boxes through a concrete jungle bigger than a football field. It's a soul-crushing job. Scan a barcode, grab a box, stack it on a pallet, repeat until your back aches. But the pay's decent, and I don't have to deal with people. The place is a maze. Towering racks, dim lights, echoes bouncing off every surface. You get used to the sounds, forklifts rumbling, metal creaking, the freezer section humming like a heartbeat. I thought I knew every corner of that building, but 3 weeks ago I found something in aisle 19 that wasn't supposed to be there, and I'm done scanning anything after that. It was a Tuesday, middle of the night, around 2 a.m. I was working the overflow stock, back by aisle 19, where they shove pallets of stuff no one's ordered in months. It's the quietest spot, farthest from the loading docks, just dust and shadows. My scanner beeped. Pick item 47B, row 12. Simple enough. I'd done 100 picks like it. I grabbed my ladder, this rickety aluminum thing that wobbles if you breathe wrong, and climbed up to the top shelf, flashlight tucked under my arm. The air up there was stale, thick with that dry cardboard smell, and the lights barely reached, leaving half the row in dark. I started shifting boxes, looking for 47B. Usually it's a label right on the side, easy to spot. But these crates were old, faded, some with packing tape peeling off like skin. Then I saw it, a yellow crate, smaller than the rest, tucked behind a stack of appliance parts. The tape was frayed, curling at the edges, and someone had scrawled "Do Not Open" across the top in thick black marker. No barcode, no shipping label, just that warning, jagged and uneven, like it was written in a hurry. My scanner kept beeping, 47B, 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 like it was locked on that thing, even though it didn't match the system. I should have climbed down, marked it not found, and moved on. But I didn't. I've always been the guy who pokes at stuff, can't leave a puzzle alone. I tugged the crate out, heavy for its size, and set it on the ladder's platform. The tape came off with one pull, brittle and dry, and underneath was a metal box, dented, cold, the kind of thing you'd store tools in. No lock, just a latch that clicked open when I brushed it, loud in the silence. I lifted the lid, expecting maybe some expired stock or broken gear. Instead, it was photos, Polaroids, a thick stack, edges yellowed and curling. I pulled one out, grainy, old, a woman in a kitchen, face scratched out with a pen, just a black scribble where her eyes should have been. The next was a kid on a bike, same deal, face gone. I flipped through more, houses, cars, people I didn't know, all with those scratches like someone wanted them erased. My stomach twisted, but I kept going, deeper into the stack until I hit one that stopped me dead. It was me, standing in aisle 19, holding that crate, flashlight in my hand, looking right at the camera. Same hoodie I was wearing, same ladder behind me. The photo was dated, yesterday's date, 1:47 a.m., written in that same black marker. I dropped it, hands shaking, and the stack spilled across the pallet, some fluttering down to the floor. That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, heavy, thudding on the concrete coming from the end of the aisle. I swung my flashlight down, beam cutting through the dark. Nothing there, just racks and shadows stretching out. But the steps kept coming, deliberate, like boots dragging, getting louder. I yelled, "Who's there?" Voice cracking, echoing back at me. No answer, just that thud, thud, thud. Closer now, maybe 20 feet away. I scrambled down the ladder, nearly slipping, metal rattling under my weight. The scanner was still buzzing, 47B, 47B, so I chucked it onto the pallet, grabbed my flashlight, and bolted. The footsteps sped up, matching me, echoing behind like they were right on my heels. I didn't look back, just ran, weaving through aisles, past the break room, all the way to the shipping bay where the night crew was. Lights were brighter there, voices shouting over the forklifts. I stopped, panting, hands on my knees, and listened. The footsteps were gone, just the usual warehouse noise, guys yelling about a late shipment. I didn't tell them. I didn't know how. Hey, I found a photo of myself in a creepy box and something chased me? They'd laugh me out the door. Instead, I grabbed a water from the machine, sat there till my hands stopped shaking, and went back to finish my shift. Took the long way around, avoiding aisle 19. When I clocked out at 6, I told my shift lead, big guy named Rico, about the crate. He rolled his eyes, said it was probably a prank, but he'd check it out. I waited by the exit while he went, sipping coffee that tasted like ash. He came back 10 minutes later, face tight, no smirk this time. "It's gone," he said. "No box, no photos, just a busted pallet up there." I pushed him, told him I'd seen it, held it, that it had my picture. He cut me off, said the ladder was tipped over, crates scattered, like someone trashed the place, but nothing else. "Drop it," he muttered, and walked off, hands stuffed in his pockets. I saw him glance back once, though, like he didn't believe his own story. I called out the next night, then the next, said I had a cold. They fired me last week. Texted, no show, terminated, no warning. I didn't fight it. Rico called me yesterday, voice low, said they found a Polaroid under a rack in aisle 19. Blank, no scratches, just a date. Tonight's date, 2A. He hung up before I could say anything. I've got every light on in my apartment right now. Door locked, blinds shut. I don't know who took that picture, or how it got there, or what's coming at 2 a.m. tonight. But I'm not waiting around in the dark to find out. That's it for Never Work the Late Shift. 7 nights where the clock ticked a little too slow and the shadows held more than they should. Thanks for joining me here at Dark Hours of Day. If these stories kept you up, don't let them be the last. Subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. The dark's always got more to tell. Sleep tight if you can.